Good evening and welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. There is a quick reference card on the desk in front of you, which provides instruction on how to use the basic speaking function of the microphone. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. Apologies for absence, item 1. We've received apologies from Pam Posnett and Councillor Illingworth. Is there anyone? No, I don't think there can be anyone else because we're all here present. So we'll move on to item 2. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of July 2021. I will propose the minutes and I'll request a seconder. So Rebecca, the second of an.
Yeah, I was going to say happy to second.
Thank you. I will confirm the minutes unless any member wishes to raise any amendments. Does anyone? No show of hands. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. Is there any member who wished to do so to make a declaration of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting? Nobody? No. Thank you. Item 4. We've got Rachel Ashley Corn present, Head of Internal Audit, to provide a brief introduction to the report. Just before I introduce Rachel, she will be leaving straight after item 4 because she has another meeting at Rutland starting at 7 p.m. So I will invite a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation. I will propose it. Is there anyone prepared to second?
Chair, I think probably we need to go to Rachel at this point to present the report.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a progress report on the delivery of the internal audit plan for the financial year to date since the last committee meeting, summarising the work that the team have been delivering, the progress made against the plan, and some of the key findings of the audits that have been finalised. So there's a full copy of the progress report provided in Appendix A. So taking the committee briefly through some of the key sections, although it will be familiar in the structure. Since the last committee meeting, obviously we have been working on a number of assignments from the 2021-22 plan. So I've provided a copy of the plan for you on pages 20 and 22 of your pack this evening. So this lists all of the assignments that we are due to deliver this year and the status of each of those, and for those which have been finalised, the outcomes of those as well. So as members will note, there are 2 audits where the reports have since been finalised. So I have summarised the key findings of those for you on pages 17 and 18 of the pack this evening. Just briefly taking you through those two audits. The first was in relation to community grants. So we've identified no significant issues here, with an overall assurance rating of good in terms of the control environment. We did identify some areas where the compliance could be further strengthened in some areas, have made recommendations in relation to that, but no significant areas of concern to highlight to the committee at this point in relation to those. The second is in relation to procurement cards. So this was one of the financial audits that we've conducted this year. And again, a good level of assurance has been given in relation to the overall findings and no significant areas of concern. We identified a good process in place in terms of the monitoring and review of the use of the cards and the transaction log completion as well. So overall, as I say, a substantial assurance over the design of the controls and good levels of assurance in terms of compliance. So nothing that I need to draw to the committee's attention at this point. I have also provided an update on the implementation of audit recommendations in the usual format. So on page 26 of your papers is an overview of the implementation rates. So we have 5 actions that have been closed since the last meeting. We currently have a number of actions that fall into the overdue categories. Of those, there are 4 that fall into the category of high priority and over 3 months overdue. And as you can see, 2 of those are over between 3 and 6 months and 2 are over 6 months. And those are summarised further for you within the report in Appendix 4 on pages 27 and 28. Just to be able to give the committee a little bit more reassurance in relation to these actions, I have asked for further updates, which we hadn't received at the time of reporting. So just taking you through the actions in the table on page 27. The first action in relation to the effectiveness of case management arrangements, which was looking at the intensive housing management service that's run by the council. The recommendation that arose from the audit that we performed in 1920 was that there should be a full service review. And I understand that that is underway, and we have been advised that this action should now be complete by February next year, is the revised date that's been set. The second, in relation to asbestos surveys, I have confirmed that there is now a full record of all properties. So we now know all of those which are up to date, and we know where the gaps are. There are some issues in some properties where officers have struggled to gain access, and they are currently taking action to try and resolve those cases. We don't have a specified date of completion because it will be as soon as possible, and obviously we will continue to follow that up and provide you with an update at the next meeting in November if we're able to conclude that action at that point. The next, in relation to rent arrears, as noted in the report, has been reallocated to the tenancy services team. The revised date for completion for that action is October this year. So hopefully, if that remains on track, we will be able to close that before the next committee meeting. And the final action in relation to rent arrears, reviewing the user profiles and job roles on the system, that has been allocated a revised timeframe of January 2022. So again, we'll continue to follow that up and report back to the committee on those as they are completed. So that's a quick run through of the key sections of the report. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Right, well, I'll open the debate up. Is there any member wish to ask Rachel any questions following the report? Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you very much for your report, Rachel. Community grants and clarification. Record keeping needs to be improved to be fair and transparent. Does this mean there was no evaluation process or a record of evaluating who scored what points to pay out the grants to? That was one thing. Then there was a penultimate paragraph. I was not clear whether there were processes in place to confirm the grant money had been spent for the purpose intended. And then I noted on a later page, it's a very tiny audit, and there was a 10-day allocation for it. It would be better if the reports came with them as a minimum with the recommendation sheet, so I could reconcile the narrative to the recommendations and the high, medium and low points. So I wasn't clear from reading it, from this, whether it was serious or not, from the community grants.
Are you able to respond to that, Rachel?
Yes, Chair. So in relation to the first question about the evaluation process, I understand that there was an evaluation process, but we're looking for a little bit more documentation to record the exact process that's being gone through, what the decisions were based on, what factors were taken into consideration in that scoring. So it's about elaborating a little bit more to emphasise why those scores have been assigned.
Yeah, I can relate to that one. Thank you. And then the other question about, I'm a bit unclear as to whether we actually checked up that they'd spent the money on what they said they were going to spend it on.
Yes, so through you, Chair. So as we've mentioned, obviously within the sample, some of the grants were ongoing, some of the work was still underway, so there hadn't been a full monitoring process. We understood that informal discussions had taken place in one of the cases, but we didn't see evidence of formal follow-up in the other cases that we tested. So that was one of the areas of recommendation, yes.
It's still needs some tidying up then. Yeah, I think these are typical recommendations for grants. Moving on to procurement, if I may, there's no volume of transactions and money spent noted. So I don't know whether it's £30,000 or 30 million. Again, there's no recommendation sheet. Now it said paragraphs 3 and 4, the card holders can review the spend online. It said, but there's no analysis of spend by management to check that they're buying things that they shouldn't do or circumnavigating procurement processes. It says the card holder can download the monthly statements, but I'm not clear from this. When the invoice comes in from the card provider to finance, I'm not clear whether the managers of the card holder actually sign off the and confirm that the payments are proper. It's of limited use having somebody who's got the card being able to check it. It's the manager that needs to know. So I was unclear from that.
Are you able to respond to that, Dawn?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So yes, the invoices would come in and they'd go to the card holder. The card holder then has to provide all of the receipts and also their own spreadsheet showing what the money's been spent on, the reason, the code, etc. And then all of that documentation goes to the senior manager for sign off. So I sign off a number of those. In terms of the spend, there are limits on any one single item and also on total amount of spend in any one month. So like you would on any kind of credit card. I don't know about some of the other areas, but the ones that I've signed off, generally, they're quite low level. I think it's been very rare that I've seen a total invoice much more than £1,000. So, you know, it's exactly as it is, really small, low value transactions.
Thank you for confirming it's £1,000 so a month, and that the managers do see it, and you see what they're buying. But as I say, it wasn't clear from the report, and I did note that there was an 8-day budget for these minor purchases, which is the same allocation for the procurement compliance with the big money. On the audit plan, you've got 10 days for the audit of risk and performance framework, which has just been approved at the council. At some stage, we'd be interested, I'm sure, in the scope of that, but not necessarily tonight. You've got an item on the plan for project management.
On now, Councillor Pritchett.
Sorry, it's the plan. You've caught me out there, haven't you? Page 6. Page 6 of the plan.
Chair, if I can clarify, that's page 20 of your report pack.
Yeah. Yes, it's page 20, but it says page 6.
Confusing me as well.
Right. You've got project management down, right? Now, my understanding, and please correct me, is project management is a process within individual projects. Could be housing, capital spend, etc. How do you actually audit project management as such without linking it to a subject.
Rachel,
No.
can you respond to that?
Yes, I'm happy to, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to confirm, I think in previous years we have focused on individual projects. We've done quite a few project specific audits, which tends to be my preference, to be honest, rather than looking generally at project management. But what we've decided this year is that we're having had some review of project management documentation, some of the procedures. We wanted to take a bit of a higher level view, some of a corporate review as to how that framework is being applied in practice. So what we intend to do, we're actually planning this audit at the moment. I'm due to attend an SLT meeting in the next couple of weeks, where we'll be discussing the projects that we intend to include in our sample for this review. So whilst we'll be looking at how the project management framework is being applied in those cases. So we're trying to get a range of different projects across the council, and it won't be the same, it won't be a full project audit of each of those, but it'll be looking at how the framework's being applied.
Yeah, you'll be looking at the principles of project management. I fully support that. And there are a number of, since I came in 2019, I know there's a number of councillors have commented on, you know, the Gantt chart, the setting targets, review dates, correction. You know, it goes back to Spike Milligan. You know, if you don't have a plan, nothing can go wrong. So, you know, it's a serious issue. So I am supportive of that. The final one. What is the audit of the planning on page 7? Page 20 as well? What is the audit of the planning services review to cover?
Through you, Chair. Yep. Yes, on page 21. So the planning service review, this is in relation to, we had the council commissioned a consultancy review of the planning service, I believe maybe 2 years ago now. And we now wanted to have an opportunity to go back and look at whether all of the recommendations, I believe there was quite a comprehensive action plan arose from that review. We wanted to go back and see what's happened since and whether those actions have been implemented, so to provide some assurance over progress that's been made in that area. Does that help?
Yes, yeah, I suppose I don't. Councillor Glance is chair of the planning committee, and I'm sure would be interested in at the preliminary stage discussing, subject to the chair of the audit committee, possibly some discussion on that one. The final one is you've got the HRA business plan. I've not seen one yet. And I did see somewhere they're declaring that there's an interim one on the risk register small print. What's that going to cover?
Through you, Chair. So we had intended to deliver this audit in Q3 based on the initial timeframes for the HRA business plan. And the scope of the audit really was to try to get some assurance over the assumptions that had fed into the plan and what the plan had been based on, how the research that had been, and whether it's all consistent. So whether what we'd ended up with was consistent with the process and the findings that had led up to it. So I'm doing a bit of a critical friend review of the plan at that stage. In relation to that particular review, I do believe we may need to postpone it later than we'd expected, because we obviously can't do that piece of work until the HR business plan is ready. And I have had conversations with the director in relation to that. So we may need to review the timeframes to make it later in the financial year.
So it's all very, very good thing. And I've got a question on that under the risk management framework that's been put off until April 2022, not to do the work, but to do a plan. So I've got a comment there. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cumbers.
Yeah, thank you. In reference to the community grants, I've had a sort of a few queries. I've had a word with Bob and Rachel, and we think it's a matter probably for scrutiny to look at and to make sure that the procedures and processes that should be in place are in place. And in addition, in the past, community grants were subject to service level agreements with the council, and they weren't prescriptive, but they gave a certain amount of guidance to how charities and charitable organisations could also help the council. Yeah, but they've gone out of favour, but I'm not quite sure why. Rachel's already indicated she'll be looking at grants at Harborough, and to see what's going on there, and to see whether they're doing things in the same way as we do here. But certainly, I think it's something that scrutiny is going to pick up and look at. Yeah, thanks.
So just to say, back in the day, there was a SIP for checklist for good practice on grant payment and the audit of it. So I don't know whether it's still current, but there was a document back in the day.
Thank you. Is there any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Chandler. Thank you.
Chairman, I would support what Councillor Cumbers has said. I think it ought to go to scrutiny because, you know, you do hear people say, well, was it spent on what it was given for? And, you know, money's tight, and when people get grants, it should be spent on what they are actually handed it for, not to move it down the line a little bit. And I would certainly support you there, Pat.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can take forward and to scrutiny at the opportune time.
On this one, it's only £47,000 divvied up to a few organisations and then a few under £1,000 grants. It's only a 10-minute job to sort out the evaluation and to check up that, you know, this is what we're giving you the money for, this is what we're getting. You know, I don't think there's necessarily a need to start an industry. It's not like we're giving 4 million out. And you know, there's a question by the, 2021, why we didn't have these basic procedures in place now. So that is a question.
Councillor Cumbers, did you want to?
I think in the past, it went to a committee and I think it was dealt with differently. And that's one of the things under the cabinet system. I don't think we were quite sort of sure what was going on. But there have been papers, there's been stuff there for us to read, you know, we've all been, you know, able to follow stuff, but it has changed. And yeah, I wasn't comfortable and other people aren't. But a service level agreement, as I say, in a way, it concentrates those bodies and makes them understand, you know, that we're not just giving out money because they're a good thing to have. You know, the council expects something back in a return, or, you know, something which accords with our strategic priorities as well.
So appreciate.
Weren't we here on the very first council meeting I came to about giving money out to the Citizens Advice Bureau and not having proper controls in place then? So I'm sorry, it's just a very basic thing and this should have been sorted. So I'll end on that. But I do respect Pat taking it up, but what I'm saying is it should have been sorted.
Yeah, I think this, if members are in agreement, we'll refer this to scrutiny. Are we in favour of that? Please, can you just show of hands? Yeah, so we'll move that to scrutiny. Okay, Kieran. I've just got the one for Rachel on page 18, paragraph 2. On these procurement cards, you say most card holders have signed the council's code of conduct. I would have thought that any officer that hasn't signed it shouldn't have a procurement card. Would you not agree with that? And should that, when you say most, is that 9 out of 10 or one person or half a dozen?
Yes, Chair. So I believe this was one isolated case, and I believe it was the case we couldn't identify where the form was. So obviously we've made a recommendation to make sure that is completed, but based on the wider sample testing, we did confirm that as standard that form must be completed before the card is handed over. So
yeah. So can we check for the next meeting that it has been signed? Speak. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation, which is that we note the report and progress made by the internal audit team in the delivery of the audit plan. I'll propose it, and Councillor Glancy is prepared to second it. Thank you. Thank you then, Rachel. And you can get off down the A606 to Rutland. The external audit letter is item 5, which is on page 31 of your agenda list. I'd now like to welcome Hayley Clark, who hopefully is with us via Zoom, the external auditor from Ernst & Young, to provide a brief introduction and pick out the highlights of the report. Do we have
Hello. Yes,
Hayley?
thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello.
If you'd like to go through your report, not necessarily page by page, but just pick out the highlights for members.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind, what I'll just do is I'll just briefly introduce myself, because I'm conscious you won't have met me before. So I'm an associate partner based in our Birmingham office, and I'll be taking over from Helen Henshaw, who was the previous partner on the engagement. The report that you've been presented with today is effectively our annual audit letter, which summarises the audit results report that you would have seen earlier in the year. So to your point, I wasn't proposing to go through this in detail, as it's effectively a shortened down version of that previous report. So it essentially highlights that we've now we've concluded our audit. It sets out audit conclusions, which is that it was an unqualified opinion, and same relates to the value for money as well. I wasn't proposing to go into any more detail on that, but of course I'm more than happy to take any questions.
That's fine. I mean, we are looking at 2019-20, which is quite a long while ago. So yes, if you can move on to the report then, please.
Sorry, that was the summary of the report.
Right. Okay. So you're now ready for any questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. So if we can ask what any member wish to ask the auditor any questions on what we've seen before you. Yes, can I ask the first question then? Page 43 of your report is the valuations. That worried me. In there's these adjustments which were made to the accounts, and particularly the cattle market, the land value. And you're saying that it was incredibly low, and that a value of 182,000 per acre would be a more reasonable assumption, and that's a conservative. That would concern me, that the council's value, which I believe is done in-house, it can make such a, if you like, mistake or error in valuing such an important asset. Is there anything you want to add on that, Dawn? I mean, it's quite a discrepancy, isn't it? I mean,
obviously I'm not an expert valuer, but
Yeah.
I think the cattle market is quite difficult because it's quite unique and it's very difficult to get comparisons. So a town centre cattle market as well is even more unique, and I think that's the difficulty. And I seem to think, maybe Hayley's nodding, I think that prompted quite a lot of discussion between our valuer, that actually when there was quite a lot of discussions about that value, we were asked for comparisons. And we struggled to find any comparisons to actually compare that to. I don't know if you want to add anything, Hayley, to that, but that's my understanding, that is the uniqueness of it that makes it difficult.
It is, and I think you're always going to find differences in opinion between different valuers just because of the subjective nature of the valuation process. I think also, given the year that 1920 was and when the valuation would have fallen, obviously there'll be the impact of COVID on that and the ability to find, you know, even more reliable data around that point in time. What I would say though is that the financial statements were amended for that, so it wasn't as though it was a disagreement between our view and the council's view. The financial statements, in our view, in the end reflected the appropriate valuation.
Councillor Chandler.
I think when this first came up, there were 2 or 3 of us, and you were one of them, that were quite alarmed at the low valuations. And I have a tendency, with respect to our external auditor, to disagree with her. All land has a value. It doesn't matter whether it's rubbishy farmland or grade 1 land. It's all got a value. And the cattle market's got a value. It's in the town centre. It must have got for development, it's got a horrendous value, hasn't it? And I think we were, quite frankly, we were sold down the drain at that last meeting. Well, it wasn't the last meeting because you had a meeting since, but it was the previous committee, I believe. And I think we were sold down the drain, and there were only 2 or 3 of us that were alert enough to see it.
That's when we voted on the accounts, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you want to respond to?
Yeah, there's differences in the purpose of the valuation. So of course, what you're valuing it here is a cattle market. So it's in use as a cattle market, and that's what the council's using it for. And there'll be other valuations, like for example, social housing, where you're valuing it as social housing. If you were to then put that land on the market as a piece of land for development, of course that value would be completely inappropriate, and you would value it as a vacant site or maybe a fettered site, but certainly one that you are putting up for development. But the value that you've got in the account is an operational cattle market, and that will affect the value because that's completely different to either industrial development land or even housing development land.
If I can come back, Chairman, it's still a town centre site. It's one of the few cattle market in the country that's in a town centre, and it's got a terrific value. I mean, farmers talk about this, the NFU meetings. I see the minutes of those sometimes, and they keep saying the value of that site.
Again, you would take into account the income that generates. So again, it's not, we do generate income from that, but it's not a huge, massive surplus that we generate, because obviously we know that livestock markets have been affected in the past. So it's affected by the income that it generates, and that informs the value. Because it's town centre and it's a huge piece of land doesn't make it necessarily valuable in the context of what we're using it for.
Sorry, Chairman, I'd refer you to Newark, where you know what's gone on at Newark with Gascoignes.
Exactly.
End of story.
For the 2021 accounts, when you come to do that, Hayley, I'll be interested to see what the figures are put forward by the auditor in comparison with the council's value on that. So, question on page 44, Hayley. This misclassification of assets within council dwellings. What with 2.764 million? What were these in particular in relation to, and why did they get in there? I just find that strange.
Unless and I have to apologise, unless Dawn knows the answer to this one, because I wasn't on the audit at that point, I would need to go away and look into that and then come back to you with a response, which I am more than happy to do.
Yeah, apologies. Without looking back at the full report, I'm not aware of what they were. I mean, they could have been, it's quite a large value, but it could have been land, for example, or it could have been shops within the housing revenue account that was just misclassified. But I'm sorry, without looking, we wouldn't know.
Could we have that brought to the answer to that brought to the next meeting then, please, rather than leaving it in the air? Dawn.
I think rather than wait to the last meeting, it's probably something that we could just circulate round to committee members outside of the meeting, so you get that more timely.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to make a suggestion, if I may. I've got you've picked up on some things. There are some other ones here. Remuneration disclosures misstated. That was 46. Page 53, there was a staff absence with only one person knew a lot of the detail at the time of the audit. And then the old favourite, the debt provision. I do apologise. I thought I'd turn that off. The debt provision again, whether it looked high to me at the last budget. And then there's those that, and with whatever you, if the director could actually satisfy you as to the update on that, and then bring it to the next meeting collectively, the queries, to meet with you. And
yeah, can we ensure that all phones are switched on to silent, please?
Sorry. The one query I've got, I mean, this is included in it, is on page 55. The need to document leases. I don't know whether that's something that you can answer now, or whether it's in the working papers.
I got that down as well.
Whether we're actually not documenting leases, but I wanted to link that to, we're a small organisation and we host a procurement department. We've got lengthy procedures, and yet this is another thing that seems to me to be linking to procurement and records. Chair.
Yeah,
thank you.
We'll put, if we can collect. Do you want to respond? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, there was 2 points there. If I could deal with the second one first around the leases. That's not saying that we're not keeping records about leases. What it's saying is that there's a change in the international financial reporting standards with regard to leases. And that's a focus on the future year. So what it's saying is it's flagging up that us, like all authorities around the country, we need to be geared up to be able to deal with the new reporting standards, which are coming in with regard to 21-22. So that's next financial year's end. So I can assure you that staff are attending training sessions. We're thinking about what we need to do. And in fact, in the audit plan, for the internal audit plan for this year, where there was some work that was going to be done on property leases, I've specifically asked that the internal audit team extend that audit to include a little bit around how we're preparing for this new reporting requirement. So it's not saying we're not doing it, it's saying it's a new thing we need to do, and we need to be adequately prepared before external audit coming in and audit it. So I hope that assures you on that one. I'm sorry, I do want to take you back, Councillor, to you referred to page 46, sorry, of the document pack. I wasn't quite sure what you wanted information back on, if I could clarify.
Just you know, just what it was. What was it? You know, whether it, what did we make a big severance package that wasn't recorded properly? What actually was it? Was it something serious or something or nothing?
Okay, so it's just the severance package item. Yeah.
It is turned off, please. So if I could, I will bring the answers to the committee at the end of November there, Councillor Pritchett. Fine. Page 49, Hayley. I think it was just straightforward. This landlord health and safety. that's still not been implemented because the work's not been done. So you'll obviously pick that up in the 2021 accounts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Page 53. Item 1, yeah, that is probably more for as the bottom 4 items. Has that been done yet, addressed yet? 2018-19, the council should be able to demonstrate the expected credit loss model for IFRS 9.
We have been working on that one, Chair, but that one is still outstanding because I think it's quite a complex technical area. So we're still working through that one.
Okay. The next one is this collection fund. We've always been reliant on one member of staff, as I'm sure you well know. Are you training somebody up? Because this member may be retiring shortly.
Yeah, through you, Chair. We've got an action plan in place to do a full training succession planning for 2 members of staff, which cover slightly different aspects, one in the revenues team and one in the finance team as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was the leasing one. Yeah, I think that's all, Hayley. Questions from me. Councillor Hewson.
If we could go back to page 43, basically on the cattle market land values, I can accept that there's going to be a difference in the business value on the cattle market as against the sort of open market value, but it does seem quite a large gap. But also it gives the value of per acre. What is the value of the site? Not per acre.
I don't know the
variation
answer to
on that.
Does anybody hit? That will have to go on the list which Dawn's collected. We will reply at the next. Absolutely, yeah. So that will hold that in abeyance. Thank you. So Cumbers.
Yeah, and page 44 and the skate park described as an asset. I just thought that was a liability. I mean, we don't own the land. We have to pay a lot of money, I gather. I'm not quite sure why it's described as an asset.
Dawn.
Yeah, through you, Chair,
Yeah.
because we own the equipment. So the equipment itself would be an asset on which we have spent capital money. So it's an asset.
I do understand that it would cost, was it 300,000 or something to remove it? You know, if the town estate decided they wanted us to leave, I just thought that possibility, lurking in the background is quite a problem.
I don't know how much it would have cost to move. I know it was sizable, but it was about £300,000 to install in the first place. So.
Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else ask? Councillor Cumbers.
The cattle market, of course, it's a big area, isn't it? And I know some of it's owned by the town estates, and of course we don't actually own the freehold. We have it on a 900-year lease or something, and that sounds all right. But I do understand that it's £50 a year that we pay the town estate. And I do understand that if we happen by mistake to miss a payment, that it immediately reverts to the town estate, that land. I mean, I hope we're insured against that mistake.
Do anyone know do you know the answer to that tonight, Dawn?
No, I'm sorry. I wouldn't. I'm not sure we're insured for that. But I think we'd have to go back to the lease arrangements regarding missing a payment, etc. As to, I don't think, because I'm not aware that it automatically reverts back to the to the town estate. I don't think that's in the agreement.
I'm pretty sure it is, but you know, obviously I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that they believe it will revert to them, you know, if a payment is missed.
I'm
It
sure.
always, bearing in mind it's only £50 a year, you know,
Yeah.
and it's quite frightening, I think, that could happen.
I'm sure Hayley's making a note of that for the 2021 audit. But yes, I'll ask Dawn to provide an answer to me for the next meeting at the end of November. Is there any other member wishing to speak on the external audit annual letter? In that case, the recommendation is to note the external auditor's annual letter. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for that item? Councillor Pritchett is the proposer.
I'll propose, Chair.
And Councillor Chandler is the seconder. So I'll thank you very much, Hayley, for taking the time to spend over Zoom and explain the report. And we look forward to seeing you shortly for the 2021 accounts.
You will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Move on to item 6, the Risk Management Annual Report. Dawn, the Director for Corporate Services, to provide a brief introduction to the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report sets out progress that's been made over the last 12 months with regard to the Council's risk management arrangements. The current policy and strategy was significantly updated a couple of years ago, and when we introduced the new governance arrangements, and is still considered to be fit for purpose. So that's not been further updated, and I think is due for a bit more of a review next year. The strategic risk register is kept under regular review alongside individual service risk registers, which are held within the directorates. You will find a full copy of the strategic risk register attached in the appendix, as well as a summary in paragraph 5.5 of the report. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but happy to answer members' questions on those. I think it's important to remember that risks can't be eliminated, and it's important that they're managed as opposed to being avoided. Because if we try to avoid all risk, then we won't move forward as a council as we should do. We undertake regular training for officers as well as members, not just on general risk management, but on specific areas where we feel there's an issue or room for improvement. You're happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Yeah, just before I open the debate, I think it'd be better when this is considered again by the council, by the audit committee, to have the red ones all in the top 4 or 5, and the risk rating of the lower ones all together, because otherwise you are moving from 1 to 7 to 13. So if there could be
I'll take that on board. I think the issue is that they move up and down, and then you've got to renumber them all, because they could change each time, because we're constantly reviewing where they sit. So a red one could become green, or a green could become amber and then red, and then you would have to renumber and cross-reference. There's quite a bit of work, I would think, involved in that.
Well, you could have a go, see how it. And these director risk registers, that gives me some concern, because there's one I brought up, the cemetery, and apparently the director for housing tells me it's right high up on her list for her director risk register. So what I personally would like to see is those high ones on each director's risk register extracted and brought before the committee at the end of November, so we can see what the other risks. I know the cemetery is one, because land values are sky high, and it may be that we feel that it should be moved to the strategic risk register. So if that could be, yeah, certainly. Go on.
Yeah, the process is, so the Directorate risk registers hold the much lower risks, and if they are deemed a high risk, so on the matrix they start scoring in the red on a service risk register, then they will be considered as to whether they are, because something could be a high risk at a service level, but actually corporately is actually quite a medium or low risk. So if something's scoring high on a Directorate risk register, then that should be considered and automatically thought about putting into the strategic risk. So that process is already actioned. So whilst the cemetery might be on the service risk register, it has not been deemed appropriate to put it in the strategic risk register, because there's actions in place that mean it is not designated a strategic risk.
Could we have the top ones then still brought forward to the committee at the next?
I think it's probably, I wouldn't want to put Directorate risk registers into the public domain in that sort of way, because they're not, that they're service level risks. I think what we could do, if members, I can take a sounding and we could circulate those to members outside of the meeting, but the focus of the committee should be on the strategic risks, not on the individual service levels in that public arena.
Councillor Glassie, did you want to say?
Do you not make them exempt items? And they won't be in the public domain, will they?
I think what I was trying to do was say that we could circulate them to you outside of the meeting, and then if there's something you feel, but at this committee really should be focusing on the strategic high level ones, not, you know, the minutiae detail of individual service risks that might be lower level and not considered high enough. Because if you focus on all of them, then you won't focus on the ones that are really important and the ones on which we should be doing a lot more work. By putting something into the strategic risk register, that's where you have an action plan and the focus is on that. Whereas when something's at a service level, then it should be managed as operational, business as usual. It's not something that is strategic and is for members to kind of focus on. What you're trying to do is get into the operational running of the council.
I still anchoring a bit up with this one is I think I would like to see what the high ones are on each director's list, whether it's whether it comes to us as an exempt item or not. I do feel it. Can I just take a sounding from the members here tonight, what they feel about that?
Thank you very much for the exchange with the director, Chair. I have quite a philosophical problem with this as being wheeled out once a year for to be presented with the risk register. Overseeing the risk assessment process and risk management is a most important role of the audit committee, covered on page 60 of the guidance book. I don't recognise the performance framework statement that the risk register is sent to the audit committee once a year. Risk management should be on every agenda and we should be controlling it. The process for proper risk management, you've got departments, portfolio holders, senior team, all the councillors, workshop, and then cabinet agreements. In respect to this register that we were sent, Chair, and I am supportive of what you're saying, the information can be anonymised, and sometimes low value risk when they're given to a more open scrutiny become high risk, and sometimes the high risk ones are not seen as so high risk. The risk register doesn't hit it for me as well, Chair. We've got 3 business areas: general fund, housing, town preset. There's no business structure to the document and related stuff's not together, e.g. IT's all over the place. There's general statements, not actual controls, risks also, data protection risks and penalties. There's no status report of action in the report. There's no specific headings for economy, regeneration or planning. There's no easy link to the corporate strategy projects. Great council people place that they just go. The Melton Distributor Road, I think, score is low, and that's what would happen if you had an all councillor workshop. And it wasn't even on the register until there became a problem last year with the county council. April 2022 to wait for a final housing plan. You know, we keep waiting on that one. Nothing on fraud and bribery within the no risk to the Melton preset, which would be implicit in complying with the 2015 Accounts and Audit Act and planning of the spend. In respect of the cemetery running out of space, there's only 351k of reserves at the last budget report and 50k working balance. So I would suggest it's high risk, and there's 87,000 for play equipment. Councillors should decide what is the big corporate risk and what is department risk. We shouldn't be told what we should be looking at. There's no proper internal audit of the town preset part of the accounts, no input of the town councillors on risks. The financial pressures are coming on the town, even before the new road and planning for services for 6,000 homes, and it lacks transparency. We can't go all year without reviewing the risk management issues, and we cannot have proper risk-based internal audit plans until we get the risk assessment right. And we're sat here now on the 28th of September, and the new cycle of risk will start with this State of Melton. Will kickstart and should kickstart a what I call proper risk process. And this will all be updated within a month, or should be, with quite a lot of it. And we can't wait for another year. Value for money, is that on it? Is small council reliance on key staff adequately covered throughout? Do we know if risk status, when risk status come up on reports to council and cabinet, they're included in it? It's just, I mean, I have worked on a number of risk registered, I've audited and I've done workshops, and it's not, I don't think this is good at all. I'm sorry.
Right. Is any other councillor, we're taking soundings for bringing items from the Directorate Risk Register to the committee, either as an exempt item or non-exempt? Anyone else wish to add their input? Councillor Glancy.
Yes, I think if it does come, or if it does come to committee as an exempt item, it gives us the forewarning of what could possibly jump onto the actual risk register that we see. And I always believe in being proactive, not having to react to events. I just think it would be a good practice to have, because if it's got to the high level, there is a problem. So yes, you say it might well jump down to low, but let's see it, and then perhaps we can all help to get it down to low.
That was my thinking. Councillor Hewson.
I agree with that, and especially on the housing, we seem to have lots of problems in here on the housing stuff, and so I think perhaps a closed meeting with the housing directorate just to see, you know, where are we going, rather than just being told what's happening. Thank you.
Just want to remind members that we have got provision in this year's internal audit plan for a review of risk management. So addressing some of Councillor Pritchard's concerns, that audit should hopefully provide the assurance or otherwise as to whether our processes and procedures in this area are satisfactory. I mean, last time we did get a good audit response on that. So again, that will be audited. Some of the items that, you know, you're picking up, like discussing housing with the housing director, I think probably are more appropriate for a scrutiny review if there's concerns in those areas. And if you have got some concerns that you want a specific audit on, then of course that can be made a provision in next year's audit plan, or likewise you could take something out of this year's audit plan and put something else instead. But of course they were assessed as being required to provide that annual assurance. So I think we just need to be careful we don't overlap with scrutiny. And also, as I say, let's see what the internal audit report brings, and that's an independent assurance of the process.
We do have 5 audit standards committees during a year, and I think it's certainly along with the director's risk, we ought to see the strategic risk register twice a year, being there's 5 committees. So I would suggest that from the chair that another strategic risk register is submitted before us, not next time's meeting, because that's when we'll consider the items on the director's risk, but twice a year as a minimum in future, certainly. How does that sit with members? That suggestion? Yeah, so you're happy with that? Yeah, so we'll go for the next meeting, the director risk registers, the high level ones extracted, and for the January or February meeting, we'll consider the strategic one again. All in favour? Yeah, okay. Yes, Don.
Just a point on this, I would be wishing to see the status of what action's being done. I don't just want to see the same document in 66 months' time. There will be movement. New risks will go on, new risks will come on.
That's understandable.
But I want to say, you know, I don't just want to see a date shoveled into the future. I want to know what's happening with it. Does that make sense? Status report towards the right of the document.
Yeah. And Don, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I don't think there's anything else from me on that. So that the recommendation is to note the content of the report and the updated strategic risk register and associated risk management action plan. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Glancy has proposed it.
Quite happy to propose.
And Councillor Chandler seconded. Thank you.
I'm happy to note it. I'm not happy to with what's being done, but noting is a different thing altogether.
And I'll say that. Yeah, I did. Yeah. 7, I've got no other urgent business. So at 7:32, I'll announce that the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.